It's me again! Yay! We're back with Sofa Sermons, and today I am going to do something which I don't usually do. I'm going to essentially recycle one of my pastor's sermons, and the reason is because when he preached on it, I did think this is the sort of thing that every Christian needs to hear, and there's no real way of avoiding it. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna give it a go at sharing that message with my viewers. So I think we should crack on. The message comes from one simple verse in Matthew 7. So it's Matthew 7 verses 13 to 14, and I'm sure you've all heard the scripture. It goes like this: "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." So Jesus is making a very important point for us all there as Christians. He makes it very, very clear that only a few people live their lives in a way that is acceptable to God and die as Christians. Now, what does Jesus mean by a narrow gate and a wide gate? Well, the wide gate and the broad path is the easy road. It's the road that everyone's walking down. It's like the current of a river, constantly going in one direction, and there's no resistance really. You just go, and it's as easy as that. But the narrow gate and the narrow path is much harder to walk. It's harder to find, and you're walking in a way that is different to the average man. So you're going to feel a little out of place. Now, my pastor made the very good point that often when people become Christians for the first time and they're a little bit later in life, so they weren't a Christian beforehand, very often, and he gave the statistic of about 93% in one study, they won't last a year in their Christianity. And he argued that the reason for this could be the foundation that we're giving these new Christians to their faith. Now, what he meant by this was Christianity is often portrayed as though it's the life of dreams. You become a Christian and suddenly everything is okay and all your problems are answered. Now, when it actually comes to being a Christian, I'm sure most of you know that this isn't the case. In fact, being a Christian is actually a lot more difficult than it first sounds. Now, what it isn't is a life of rules. What it is a life of freedom to follow Christ. Now, following Jesus is not something that should be taken lightly, and is something that takes a lot of heart. You have that freedom to say no to sin. Now, sin is the way of life of the human race. So when people see you not sinning, it makes you unusual. And you'll also find that you're having to make decisions that don't benefit you often, because you're living for Christ and not for yourself. On top of this, a lot of people experience tragedy, and they can't explain that with their new faith. They feel as though now they have God looking out for them, nothing bad can ever happen to them. And when it does, they feel as though God has let them down, or he couldn't exist for that reason. Now, we all know that that isn't true, that isn't the case. And this needs to be something that we're addressing. I mean, a lot of us now, even as Christians, really struggle with our faith when bad things happen to us. But Jesus made it quite clear that we're on that narrow path, that we've entered through that narrow gate, and he never said that was going to be easy. In fact, Jesus mentions quite a few times throughout the Gospels that being a Christian is a life of suffering in many ways. Now, and that's not to say that it isn't a blessed life, and it's not the best life that you can live, and that you can't get a lot of joy out of it, but it is going to be difficult. We've entered that narrow gate on that narrow path, and if you're not finding that difficult, then I'd say that that's unusual, because it is the very nature of being a Christian to go through struggles. And I would argue that we need those struggles to become stronger in our faith and to use them as a testimony to how good our God really is, that he brought us out of that place. So let's say your friend becomes a Christian. That's the most amazing thing that can happen, but please, please, please don't suggest to them that everything will be easy from now on, because it just doesn't work out like that. In fact, in many cases, it works out the opposite way completely. But we're living a life for something better. And that needs to be the point here. Those of us that last a bit longer in Christianity, the reason is simply for this. We are prepared to go through hard times for something much, much better. We're not doing it to make our lives easier, we're doing it to make our lives better. We choose that narrow path because that is the right path, not because it's the easy one. We do not have the freedom to do whatever we want, but we do have the freedom to say no to sin. So yeah, you can thank my pastor, Pastor Dave, for that message, because I basically recycled it. But I'm sure I'll take it as a compliment because I just saw it as a vital message for you guys. So Dave, if you're watching, good sermon. And he did it better than me, but unfortunately Dave doesn't have a YouTube channel, so I've stolen that one from him. I hope you have a fantastic day. If you haven't subscribed, feel free to do so. Otherwise, feel free to like me on Facebook, like the video, give it a thumbs up, retweet if you're on Twitter, and all that stuff really. Other than that, have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video.